environmental defenders and rights in Colombia. First of all, I'd like to thank our partners, those who have sponsored this event. On the one hand, from the Study of Global Studies from Duke University, also Environmental Law Institute from the US, and others. This event is part of a series of webinars that we have put together on different topics that lead to the conference, the second global conference on peace building and environment of the Association of Peace Building of the US. I'd like to tell you that if you need to listen to this webinar in English, please use the interpretation icon in the bottom of your screen and then click on the English channel so you can hear the webinar in English. So those of you who have just joined the session, I'd like to use the interpretation icon in the bottom of your screens. He was first giving instructions in English and now he's giving instructions in Spanish so that you may listen to the language audio of your preference, either English or Spanish. In other words, there is simultaneous interpretation service and the interpretation icon is in the bottom of your screen. I hope you can find it. Okay, to get started with this conversation, I'd like to welcome our speakers. First of all, Clemencia Carabalí, Amado Villafaña, Winsel Duque, who's with me here in Barranca Bermeja. I was able to come here and share with Ubetzel, with him, to share with him, to meet him personally. And they'll be sharing with us their legacy, the struggles, big struggles they have faced for many years, sustained throughout a long time. They have fought for the environment and to defend the rights of the communities where they work. Very briefly, I'll be introducing each one of them individually before they present, but I'd like to welcome all of them together. I thank them, of course, for their willingness, their availability to come and join us and talk to us. Of course, we're very pleased to have Clemencia. She has National Prize of Human Rights. She's in the north of Cauca, Amado. He's in the Sierra Nevada in the north of Colombia, near in the coast, leading peace processes in Middle Magdalena. Now, why are we holding this webinar? Of course, since everyone knows, and most participants know, and people in general in Colombia, there is a campaign, outrageous campaign to murder environmental leaders, social leaders, that is totally destroying the social weaving, the social context of these communities. So beyond life, of course, has an absolute value. Any life has an absolute value and a countless value, and it's a shame that this is happening. But when leaders, especially leaders, are murdered, it's even more painful, and it's even more complicated for communities to continue to unfold and progress because it's these leaders of an environmentalist defenders who promote the agenda and they defend their territories. So I rather not to I rather not give numbers because the figures are really overwhelming. More than one assassination is already too much, and there's no doubt that what we want to do during this webinar is precisely to give them a space to express their voices, to make their work visible, to make their names known, to make known what they do, their management, because that's the greatest value of what they're doing in these territories. I like to, before we start with the interventions, I'd like to ask Clemencia and Amado Wenzel that at the beginning of their presentations, please do tell us very briefly about their context. In other words, where they are, what kind of challenges, environmental challenges they face, and also the cultural context of the ecosystems where they are developing their work agenda, so that the participants in the webinar may have a context, some background, understand more clearly the context of the territories where you are working. One more point. Part of the motivation of this conversation also has to do with the current debate in the Escazú Agreement. This is an international agreement highly relevant for environmental concerns and for the protection of leaders and access to environmental justice. This is a debate that is ongoing at Congress, Colombian Congress, led by the government, the national government, but with very high opposition from different guilds and other stakeholders. So it's important to express here what are those Escazú chapters that for environmental leaders and their communities and their territories are very relevant. I mean, of course, the right to participation, the access to information, which in spite of that here in Colombia, there are some elements to have access to environmental justice. They're still insufficient. They do not operate properly. Access to environmental justice is a critical concern because the judicial branch in Colombia does not have an environmental specialty. And we know that in spite of the fact that there is a lot of legislation on the environment, having true access to it is very complicated. And finally, the protection to environmental leaders. The Escazú Agreement specifies a chapter with complementary additional measures that will allow to have this protection. So I like to leave these open questions for you, of course, to nurture this conversation with so much experience from Clemencia and the others, to listen to them and to harvest, if you wish, this knowledge, or from this knowledge that they have, to hear about their learning experiences. So being aware of the fact that we have one lady in our panel, I'd like to introduce Clemencia first and give her the floor. Clemencia is an African Colombian leader of human rights. She's based in north of Cauca. It's a department or state located in the Colombian Andean region. It has, if I'm not mistaken, the greatest number of assassinations of environmental leaders in Colombia today. This year, she received the National Award for Human Rights Defender in Colombia. Human Rights Defenders. Her work has to do with empowering women, enabling women in self-protection, and to defend the rights of the rights of land and environmental justice. Colombia is a member of Colombian Association of Afro-Colombian Women in Cauca. So thank you, Clemencia, for your time. Thank you for your willingness to join us. I know you had some medical appointments, but it's good to hear that you're fine. And go ahead, please. Well, very good morning, all those of you who have made this possible uh, together. I want to thank the two Miguels. We have two Miguels with us. Thank you for your big effort. There's no doubt that it contributes to continue to raise our voices for this necessary work to defend and reivindicate human rights and environmental rights. I also want to thank those of you who are listening to us, who have set this time apart to join us and shared with us these few minutes. There's no doubt. Well, I come from the north of Cauca, near the Pacific coast. I am part of this association of African Colombian women in Cauca. As a matter of fact, the north zone of Cauca represents a geographical location that is key, very important. And it also represents a zone, a territory that is very rich in biodiversity. And that causes that somehow part of the conflict will concentrate in this region because of the logical interests it embeds. It's a region that allows connection to mostly all other regions of the country, but also because of the quality of the soils. There are many interests for exploitation, both mining as well as agriculture exploitation here in the north of Cauca. We see a very big enterprises. It's kilometers and kilometers of crops, for example, sugar cane, kilometers and kilometers that was just food production to grow coffee, cocoa, plantain. That was the people's economy, native economy, and both indigenous peoples and African Colombians. So that is the region where we are. Part of the conflict that still remains in Cauca has to do with land management, land tenure, land uses, and some big landowners. And okay, I am very pleased once again to participate in this webinar. Since I was just greeting, I'm gonna leave it there so that we just step into the subject matter.
Amado, adelante, por favor.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Amanda? No, I'm sorry. Amanda, please go ahead.
Estás en silencio, entonces no te podemos escuchar
You are
porque estás
muted.
fuera
You
del
need
micrófono.
to activate your microphone, please, Amado.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Ahí
Can
te
you hear me
escuchamos.
now? Yes, now we can hear you.
Bueno, primero que todo agradecer
First of all, I want to thank
a todas estas personas que hacen posible
all
que
these people who have
podamos
made
compartir por
this
estos
event
medios
possible,
y
that
podamos conocer
make it possible
mutuamente.
to meet one another here and share
Yo
here.
soy indígena
I am an indigenous member, Arhuaco community in the
en la
Sierra
Sierra Nevada,
Nevada,
Santa
Santa
Marta.
Marta. Here in this at the
Hay
Sierra,
cuatro pueblos
there are
indígenas
four indigenous peoples.
que tenemos la misma cosmogonía,
We
el
have the
mismo compromiso,
same commitment,
la misma ley de origen, a pesar
the
de que
same
tenemos cuatro idiomas,
original law, even though we have four different languages.
que es el Kogui, el Wiwa, el
It's
Kankuamo
Kogui,
y
Kabuavo,
el Arhuaco al cual
and
pertenezco.
Arhuaco, the one I am part of.
En derechos humanos es muy importante
Speaking of human rights, it's
separar
very important
las
to
dos cosas,
separate to us
porque prima
because,
lo
first of
más
all,
importante los
the
derechos
most important one is the rights of nature
de la persona,
than a
porque es
person's
la
right.
única que garantiza
Because
poder
that's the only one that guarantees to be able to
existir
continue to exist as
que
people,
pueda
as
existir el
individuals,
agua, el aire,
that there is
los
water, air,
animales.
animals, birds.
Entonces, para nosotros es más
To us,
importante
it's more
la
important
violación de los
the
derechos
relation, I mean, the
de la
violations
naturaleza.
of rights of Mother Nature is
Eso
more
fue
important, more
lo
critical
más
to us.
relevante pues,
That's
que
it.
traemos
And
ya en el tema.
I'll expand on this later.
Gracias, Amado.
Thank you, Amado.
Sí, muy buenos días.
Well, very good morning.
Contento de estar
I'm very pleased to have joined you
contigo.
today with you.
Gracias a esta posibilidad
Thank you.
que nos dan
And thanks technology
poder conectarnos
so that we
y
can
hablar
join, get together,
de los
connect with one
retos
another and express our
y las
challenges and
esperanzas
also to express our hopes
de esta región del Magdalena Medio.
in this region of
Yo soy
Magdalena
Wenceslao
Medio.
Duque
I
Rojas,
am Uwencel Duque Rojas,
director del programa de desarrollo y paz del Magdalena Medio.
director of this
Estamos
program,
vinculados a
Peace
la red
and Development Program in
regional
Magdalena Medio. We articulate with
de
a
desarrollo
program
y
network
paz
for
en
regional
Colombia a través
development
de
and peace in
PRODEPAS.
Colombia through PRODEMAS network.
Somos alrededor de unos 27 programas.
It's about 27
Vivo
programs.
en Barranca Bermeja,
I live in a city
en
called
esta región
Barranca Bermeja, and I live in a region in
una
Magdalena
región
Medio. This
que
is a region
de alguna manera
that
es
somehow
central
is a
para el
center, it's a
país,
hub
la
to
región
our country.
donde
It's the
Barranca
region
Bermeja
where,
probablemente
especially Barranca Bermeja, the main city, you find
todavía
the
hoy
oil
es la
refinery.
refinería más grande
We still say that
de
it's
América del
Colombia's and
Sur.
South America's biggest
Tenemos una
refinery.
reserva de oro
We have a gold
en la serranía de San Lucas
reservoir in San
que
Lucas
llega
Sierra or
a
mountain range. In the central mountain range, there's also
y
coal
tenemos
mining and other minerals.
un ecosistema estratégico
It
alrededor
has a
del
strategic
Magdalena Medio
ecosystem along the Magdalena
situado
River because
en la fase
we
media del
are
río
in the mid
Magdalena.
phase of the Magdalena River
Bosques
forests
en gran proceso de deforestación
that are being logged and are being
y digo que
impacted.
la Magdalena
It is
Medio
said
tiene
that
una de las 50
Magdalena Medio is one of the
regiones más
50
biodiversas del
regions
mundo,
that are
pero al
most
mismo tiempo
biodiverse in the world.
en
but at the same time, in that sense, is one of the most,
digamos, en
let's
ejercicio de
say,
conservación.
impacted
Un gran
or
motivo por
affected,
el cual
violated. That's a big challenge we face
todas
to
estas
be
zonas
able
que son
to protect these
estratégicas.
ecosystems of our
Digamos,
region.
un parque
There are two parts,
nacional
one national
natural
natural
de los
park
Wiwas,
called
otro parque
Yariguíes
regional de
National
las
Char Park, a regional
Arhuacos
park
en Santander y
in
Boyacá.
Santander and Boyacá,
Y en
two
proceso de
departments,
construcción
and it's being built or
una,
it's being
una
processed.
área de
It's an
protección y
area
conservación en
of
San Lucas.
protection and conservation in San
Allí
Lucas
es
mountain
muy
range.
importante
There is an
la
important
labor de
ongoing
conservación
dialogue between our
de
organizations
los
and
defensores de derechos humanos
communities, the
con
defenders of human rights and territory defenders, together with the national government represented by the Ministry of Environment, National Natural Parks, and other ministries that have to do with the system of the protected areas in Colombia.
Bien, gracias,
That's it.
Wenzel.
Thank you, Vincent.
Perfecto. Entonces,
Very well.
pues yo quisiera ya que todos
Now that
nuestros
all
participantes
our panelists introduced
acá
themselves, I'd
nos
like to
presenten,
start off with
luego
Clemencia,
podemos
and then,
ir
of
en ese
course,
orden, si les parece
we
bien.
can stick to the same order
Primero,
if you agree.
que tengan el espacio
First of all, during
como
this
para
first
poder
block, I'd like to give you the opportunity to
cuál es su
share
gestión como líder
your
ambiental
management as an environmental
actualmente,
leader. What are the
retos y desafíos más
challenges,
apremiantes que ustedes ven
difficulties, the
enfrentar
biggest
en el
ones that
día a día
you face daily in your
para
territories
desempeñar su labor
so that you
como
can
defensores
do
o
your job
defensores.
as environment
Y luego
defenders.
de esa ronda de intervenciones,
And then after that round of
quisiera que ya
interventions,
Amado y Wenzel nos compartan
Amado, Clemencia, and
sus
Wenzel
experiencias y
will share
sus
their
apreciaciones
experiences and their
sobre
points
este tema.
about this
Voy a
topic,
abrir un espacio para
and
que ustedes
then we'll
puedan
open another
conversar
time for uh,
digamos,
open dialogue, to have an
en
open
espacio y poder
conversation.
escucharlos.
Let's say it'll be very enriching to hear you.
Y eventualmente si ustedes
And
sienten que
eventually, if you can
la
ask one
comprensión
another questions or you can
sobre
counter ask
la
mm,
labor de defensores
about the work of defending the
en
environment in
diversas
regions that are so diverse, such as Magdalena Medio,
regiones del
Sierra
norte.
Nevada, the Nevada
Entonces,
Sierra, and
Clemencia,
Cauca. So,
la
Clemencia,
palabra, adelante
the floor is yours.
Bueno,
Well,
efectivamente,
thank you.
el trabajo
As a
que
matter of
hemos
fact, that
realizado
the work that we
desde
have
los
done,
30 años en
especially
esta
during
región
my last
amazónica
30
de
years in
Sudamérica,
this region of
tiene que
North
ver,
Cauca,
entre
has
otras
to do
cosas,
with,
con la
amongst other
defensa
things, the
del
defense of
río, con la defensa por el desvío del
the
río Rímac
defense
al embalse
of
Salvajina.
Salvajina
Esta
River and
realidad
basin and a
comenzó
reservoir.
en
Salvajina Reservoir
1985,
was built in
que es para
1985
generar energía a la
in order
región,
to generate
pero que lamentablemente
electricity, power for the region.
causó muchas
That was the
víctimas
excuse. But today we see how many villages, nearby villages near that big project, they still do not have electricity.
nosotros tenemos
But
claro cómo
we understand clearly
se
that the
hace
initial
para
purpose of building
generar
this
energía,
reservoir was to be able
controlar el
to
caudal del
control
río
the
para controlar
flow of
las
Cauca River so it wouldn't
condiciones
flow, or
para
to
la
generate the
producción
conditions
de
for
la
the
caña de azúcar
expansion
en
of
esa zona
sugarcane
de
in
esa
these
región.
flatlands of our
Pero
region.
asimismo, un gran
Similarly,
interés
there
también
was great
de
interest
generar
to be
energía
able to
para
generate
comercializarla
energy, to sell it, to
precisamente
commercialize it, but
en
not
la
precisely in
región
our own region, but to
caucana,
export it somewhere else.
generando una
That's
serie de
generating
conflictos
some
muy
conflicts
graves
that are
de
very severe,
violaciones
very
a los
delicate,
derechos humanos,
violations of human
de abusos
rights
sobre
and
el despojo
ethical
de las
directions. And
familias que
for example,
pertenecen a estas
detachment of lands of these
comunidades
families that
y
used
todo
to
su
own their lands, their
acervo
farms,
cultural
and their
que
cultural
les
life
pertenece, así como el
ran
desarrollo
or spun
cultural
around these
ancestral.
activities, as well as
Esta
ancestral
situación
mining.
de
So
desplazamiento,
that's the
de
situation of
despojo, trajo
displacement and
consigo
detachment brought
también
about, and
países
of course also the present,
foráneos,
the apprentice of
gente que llegó de fuera a trabajar
foreigners,
en este
people who
sector
came from
y
other states to
especialmente
work in
atraídos
this sector, and especially
por el
attracted by
valor
gold,
que
the
hay
gold
en la
that there
minería
is,
en
there
Cauca,
is in the basin
generando
of Cauca
situaciones
River.
de
There
violencia
were
sexual,
situations of sexual
eh,
violence, of course,
de
uh,
esclavización doméstica a
this
mujeres
domestic
en la
slavery,
región
especially
y
women
por
in the
supuesto
region,
pues el
and of
saqueo
course the
y abusos de
theft of
la
our
tierra.
natural resources.
Desde entonces,
Since
bueno,
then,
posteriormente
well,
nos enteramos de que se
later
iba
we
a
found
desviar el
out
río
that
en
the
este embalse,
Ovejas River would be
toda vez
the
que
course would be
necesitaban
changed
mayor
to come to
caudal
this reservoir
para
because it
las
needed greater
cisternas
flow for
y
the
entonces desde
electricity
las
project, power
comunidades
generation project. So
nos
that communities,
organizamos y
we became
consideramos que
organized and we
la
felt
desviación
that
del río
If they change the course of this Oejas River, then that would be the last step, because with this reservoir and the river, and they had lessened the means of life and our livelihoods. So we started to defend this Ovejas River. It was many meetings, it was strikes, riots. We had to, unfortunately, we had to take uh, to block the River Panamericana Road and Suarez Cali Road with the support of the student movement. And we were able to stop that mega project to deviate or to change the course of the Ovejas River. I think some years later, some 10, 12 years later, the a multinational restarted the project, resumed the project, and once again, we had to lead together with colleagues of this National Black Community Association. The, we started there, and of course, the indigenous communities met in their association in our region, north of Cauca. We led this struggle to keep, to preserve the river as a space of life, to keep the river as a space where people, the Black people and indigenous peoples, we can be, do, and stay. So it's an inter-ethnic committee. It's a space of work for these two ethnies, these two peoples that inhabit this region, Blacks and indigenous members. So we have articulated work to defend not only the rivers, but also the land and topics related to our human rights. Later, then, well, mining came very strongly, illegal mining, I mean, another very complex situation which has caused not only threats, displacement, assassination of leaders, those of us who oppose that kind of practice that they destroy the environment and all forms of life, but also it has impoverished people who years and years have been protecting these resources that generate life for everyone in our country, because to the extent that we protect water, we do not only take care of it for ourselves. We need this water where it is generated, where it begins. But we were protecting for many people for many people in country, those that bottled water that goes to big cities in Colombia, Bogota, Medellin, it's not in a store. It's not created in a store. It's born here in our territory. It's created. It starts here in our territory. That's why I say when we protect nature, it's not only for us in this region, it's for everyone. So we have led this struggle to defend or to go against illegal mining and to defend ancestral mining, the mining that our great grandparents had done and have carried out throughout life. But unfortunately, with the arrival of yellow machinery, what we call criminal machinery, like I said before, this practice damages and harms all forms of life present in our territory. On the other hand, our ancestral mining has been displaced, has been completely annihilated because they use chemicals that gather all materials, most of the materials that are present in the soil or in the subsoil, leaving people who used to before they would extract with just a bowl in an area of the territory just a little amount of gold, but the river itself in its from the normal process of the river in the flow would recover it. So grandmothers would go and try to collect gold today, but then tomorrow she would go to the same place because the river during the nighttime they would run this cycle. The river would run this cycle, but they can't do that today anymore. First of all, because contamination has impacted health. First of all, second, because this is somehow protected by the by private armies. Actually, part of one of the motivations that brought paramilitaries to this region between 2000 2004, which promoted the Naya massacre here in a municipality called Buenos Aires and Buenaventura. It was mining. It was because of illegal mining. And we can see today how, unfortunately, it continues to happen. There still are some dynamics related to paramilitaries in the mining zone, especially Buenos Aires, Suarez, and Santander de Quilichao, different municipalities. Mining has brought big complications to people's lives. Some 5 years ago, more or less, we also had it was poor management of this exploitation, the open pit exploitation. There was an accident where more than 25 people lost their life. There were people from the region. They were doing mining
y
activity,
iniciamos todo un
and we
proceso
started a
de
process
información,
to
de
claim, to
identificación para que la
justify
autoridad competente
before the
pudiera
competent authorities,
efectivamente
but
actuar.
unfortunately, to this
El
date,
pero que se le ha puesto, el poco pero que se le ha
the
puesto
little
es que esta
contention, the
no
only
fue irracional, ha
counteraction they
sido
have
por
imposed
el
has
movimiento de
been
las
the
masas
movement
de
of
las
mass,
mujeres,
because
de
it's
las
been only because of our complaints,
organizativas,
how we have become organized. We,
porque
the
realmente la
blacks and the
impunidad
indigenous, have come together because
es
impunity here
muy grande,
is,
¿sí?
is
Frente a los
huge,
temas no
is
solo
rampant
de violación de
in these
derechos
topics,
humanos,
and not
sino
only
temas de
violation of human
asesinatos
rights, not only
a
assassinations and
líderes
threats
y a lideresas que se
to
han
leaders
enfrentado, sino también
and
temas
attacks, but
de
also
pedofilia criminal,
in the
de cómo
sense of this
día a
criminal
día
mining, to see
dañan
how
el
day
agua,
after day they
dañan
damage
el
water,
aire.
they
¿Y
damage
por
the
qué?
air.
La gente no
Today, for
puede ir al
example,
río.
people can't go to the river in many regions,
En muchas partes
in many
de los
places
ríos,
of our
Eta,
rivers,
Mazamorrero
Etamas,
y Cauca,
Morrero,
que
and
son los
Cauca
ríos
rivers, they can't go to the
que
river.
manejan esta región.
They
Por
are
la
the
razón
rivers
de
in
que
this
por
region
la alta
because
contaminación
of the high
de las materias y
contamination
los productos que
of
utilizan,
mining and the products they use.
pues nos enfermamos, ¿sí?
Well,
Nos
we
salen
become ill, we get sick,
placas
we
en
get
nuestra piel.
some bruises on our
Han habido ya
skin.
muchos casos de
There have
mujeres
been
que
several
también
cases of
han
women who have
fallecido
lost their
de manera
babies.
prematura.
They babies are
Incluso han
lost.
habido tres
They have
muertos
miscarriages. There have
desde,
even
no
been three
solamente
deaths,
desde los centros
three casualties.
hospitalarios,
The hospital
médicos
centers,
que
we
nos han
believe that
contactado, pero
they have
sabemos
hidden, they haven't told us the
y las
truth.
razones de esas muertes,
They have
pues
hidden the
sabemos
reasons
que
for
tienen
those
que ver
deaths.
sin duda con
But
los
we know it
altos
has to do with the high chemicals, the high levels of chemicals that
a
people
través del agua
are exposed to
contaminada
and
que nos
they
está dejando esta
consume through the water
actividad criminal.
because we use our water and this is water
Por otra
contaminated
parte,
by
también
criminal
decir
mining. On the other hand, I
que
should
esto
also
se
say that
conjuga con
this
el
comes
incremento
together
de
with the
los
increase
incendios
of
forestales en
illegal
territorios
crops in our
precisamente
territory.
debido a la falta de la
Unfortunately,
implementación
because
de
of
la
the
acuerdo
lack
de
of
paz
implementation
que
of
se
the peace
cumplió en
accords
diciembre en
effectively and
Colombias
efficiently and
por parte
comprehensively
del gobierno
on
colombiano,
behalf of the Colombian
ha
government,
dejado
well,
estas zonas que dejaron
these zones
las
that
tropas guerrilleras
the
de las FARC,
old
se han dejado
FARC
de una manera
guerrillas
desprotegida,
were left,
habiendo entonces
but they've been
primero la
unprotected. So
proliferación de
there's been
montes
a proliferation of many armed
antes
groups,
la ley y
outlawed groups,
segundo
of course, and
pues
second,
la
the
incursión de mayor
arrival
cultivos de coca en nuestro
of greater
territorio y que pues
coca
están
crops in our
comprometiendo
territories,
de cierta
mainly
manera
promoted by
poblaciones
foreigners,
extrañas al
by
territorio
people who are not from
sin
here,
ningún control, a pesar de que
outsiders,
la fuerza
without any
pública
control, in
la,
spite of the fact that the public
casi la única presencia
forces
que hace la fuerza
are
pública en los
sometimes present.
territorios
The only presence here in our
es
territories in the mountains, especially in Buenos
el
Aires and
fronterizo
Santander and
y
Suarez,
la única institución que hace
the only
presencia
institution that is
es
present there
la
is the
defensoría
armed
y
forces.
eso
I think
vemos
the army.
como
And
ojos y
then we
narices
still see how in front of their
porque
noses there are more and more
no sabemos qué puede
crops,
pasar,
illegal crops. We don't know how they
por qué no
extract
los
it.
controlan,
We don't know why they don't
así que
control it
están
from the
viendo,
moment they are
quieren tener
planting it,
ahora sí
when they
bien
have
la
the
idea
seedless.
de
But now they
fumigar
come with the idea to
ese lícito
spray not
y
only killing the
básicamente
illegal crops, but also
nuestros
they will
cultivos
also
tradicionales
destroy our
que
traditional
no solo
crops
hemos intentado
that we have
fumigar
not only
la
tried to recover after
última
the
oleada de fumigación que
last
también hubo
wave
hace
of
4 años, donde arrasaron con no solo las
spray
zonas
and
de uso industrial,
fumigation
pero también
that only not only did they destroy the legal crops, but like I said, all our own like
el
corn,
contraband, sino
plantain,
que ahorita
coffee, and
han
cocoa.
habido
And
amenazas
now
de
the new
que
threat is
si el
that
gobierno de
as
Duque
of
se
this new
promueve
Duque's
nuevamente
administration, they
la
will
construcción de
again
zonas
promote fumigation
cercenales
or
cuando
air
se debería avanzar en la implementación de los
with
acuerdos de paz
from
en
air,
este punto, porque
whereas
la
they should
construcción
instead make
de
progress in the implementation of the
estos
peace
campos
accords,
por
the
leases.
replacement of these illegal crops to
Decir
be replaced
también
by illegal
que
crops. I should also
es
say
difícil
that this
alinear
situation has caused
a líderes
threats
con
to
quienes
leaders
defendemos
because
los acuerdos
those
de
of us
paz
who
y
defend the peace
tenemos
accords and
claro de que es la
those of us who
única
understand
opción que nos
that
queda
it's
para
the
salvar
only option we
vidas.
have left to save
Creemos que el
lives.
acuerdo es
We
una
believe that
gran
the
oportunidad para que
agreement
construyamos
is a
paz
big
en este
opportunity
país que ha
for
sido
us to turn
bastante
this
mal
violent
vivido
page for over
y
50
nos ha
years of
costado
war that
soportar
we
por
have had to put up with, at
muchos años.
least us, the last generation.
Pero sin embargo, pues al
But
parecer este no es el
however,
interés de
this
muchos
is
y
not the interest of
de
many,
muchos quienes dirigen a este país,
many of those who lead this country, and
particularmente en el
especially
gobierno. Y en
the
ese sentido
government, the
yo creo que
present
tenemos
government. In
muchos
that
retos,
sense, I think we
muchos
face
retos
big challenges. We
desde las
continue to
comunidades,
face
desde
big
las
challenges.
mujeres,
We, the communities,
desde
women,
las comunidades étnicas y
the
uno
ethnical
tiene que
communities,
seguir
and
abogando
one
por la
has to continue to defend the and ask for the
desigualdad,
effective implementation of peace accords. Many people want to take
fracasó,
this message that it
de
was a
que
failure, that
hay
the
violación a los derechos
topics
humanos
of
y
human violation, human rights
tiene que ver
violations
con
that
que
persist. It has to do
hay
with the fact that the
partidos,
guerrilla has not done their
y
part.
tiene que ver con que
It
hay
has
que
to do with other
devolver ese
things that
acuerdo
they need
porque
to
una parte
revocate that agreement because it's just an opportunity given by Santos administration too far. Some lies that we, those of us who are in the territory, we know that it's not a perfect agreement, but it's an important pathway to implement it as it was agreed.
avanzaríamos significativamente
We have made
para garantizar
significant
ese
progress
derecho, el derecho a la
to
vida,
guarantee that
el derecho
right, the right to
a
life,
la tierra, el derecho
the
a
right
producción sin
to land,
explotación,
the right
el
to
derecho
work, the
incluso
right to
a la
production, even
educación
the right to
y
education,
necesidades básicas
and
que
the
no se
basic
había
needs
llegado
that the government has denied for
ante
years
la ausencia
to
de la
these
presencia
areas,
estatal
given the
con
absence, the complete
servicios
absence of the state
esenciales.
presence with the basic
Asimismo,
services to people.
retomando
Okay,
el tema
so
de los retos,
going back to the challenges,
tenemos
once again, I think we have to
retos no
insist on the
escasos
implementation of the
y
peace
exigir que se
accords. We need
mantengan
to enforce it. We need to
compromisos y
insist that they maintain those mechanisms of
insistir en que el
comprehensive
financiamiento
justice, peace, and reparation,
cumpla
especially the
con
ethnical chapter that has a big environmental component in
poner
the sense
una
that with it,
salvaguarda
there are
a
some
los
safeguards
territoriales
of ethnic and territorial rights, such as Law 70, 005, and 004 bills regarding indigenous peoples. Another challenge has to do with how to recover and strengthen ancestral mining. I think that's a key activity to us so that these ethnical peoples can continue to survive, especially African peoples. It's an activity that our ancestors have
mayores y
done.
mayores, generación tras
Our
generación,
past generations have done this,
les permitió
and
vivir
then they
sin
were able to
desarrollar.
make a living, to
Y yo creo que
survive
una manera de
without
reconstruir
language.
los
I think a
recursos
way of
étnicos es
rebuilding
también
social weaving has to do
utilizar
with
prácticas
rebuilding
productivas
these ancestral
para la
productive
vida,
practices
para la
for
vida del
life
ambiente.
and for the
Y
environment.
otro reto tiene
And
que ver
another
con
challenge has to be
cómo
or
se
has
le
to
da el
do with
espacio a la
how
voz, o sea,
we
cómo se le
beat
puede,
cocaine, how we
de alguna
can
manera,
somehow
cómo se pueden generar
how we
condiciones
can
para que
create,
esto
enable
se
conditions so that
trabaje,
the illegal crops do not continue to
cómo se
prosper,
implementa una política
how we
pública
implement
que
an
está
efficient
recogida
policy, which of
en el
course
acuerdo de
is
paz.
also included in the peace
Pero yo
accords.
creo
But I believe
que el
that
tema de la coca
the issue
genera
of
profundas afectaciones
coca
ambientales por la
plantations,
contaminación que
they also
produce.
impact the environment, the contamination that it
Por otro
involves.
lado,
And on the other hand, the other challenge has to
con
do
el tema de
with
la impunidad.
with impunity.
Mire, a más
Look,
de un año, año y medio de la
more
masacre
than
militar
1 year and year and a half ago of
del atentado del 4 de mayo
an
del cual
attack
fui
on May
víctima
4th, I was a
junto con
victim
compañeros y compañeras
together
que
with other
estuvimos en la
colleagues.
reunión.
We were in a meeting
Después
and we
de
were
año,
attacked.
año y medio,
After more than 1.5 years,
no sabemos cuáles son
we
los
still do not know the
responsables
material
intelectuales.
actors and much less the
Pero
intellectual
hace poco también
perpetrators.
asesinaron a la
But
compañera
short
Cristina,
ago,
la compañera indígena
Christina and
Bautista,
Christina
que
Bautista, an indigenous
asesinaron
colleague, was murdered precisely a
precisamente hace
year ago.
poco un año,
It's been a
precisamente
year
hace
since she
8 meses
was
por el
assassinated.
asesinato
It was a terrible assassination.
de la
And
parte
another partner
frontline indígena que
from
le acompañaba.
indigenous guard
Y por
that was
otro
with her.
lado, hace
And on the
menos
other
de
hand,
5
less
meses,
than 5 months ago,
la
there was
amenaza
a
también del
threat
atentado a
also,
la
an
compañera
attack
Janet Mosquera.
against Janet Mosquera.
Entonces,
So
si estos hechos no se investigan,
if
se
these
sancionan
deeds are not
y
investigated and punished
se
and
castigan de
criminalized
manera eficaz, pues
and
entonces
prosecuted effectively, well, simply the message that is being sent is
esto se
that
puede seguir haciendo.
they can continue to do it.
Así que un
They
reto
can keep
importante es
doing it. So an important
garantizar
challenge is to
justicia
claim and ask for
y
justice, demand
derribar la
justice,
impunidad
and
que
overcome
rampea
impunity
en este país.
that is rampant in our country.
Eh, bueno,
Okay?
yo creo que tendríamos mucho que
I
decir,
think
pero
I have a lot more to
quiero
say, but I hope that
las
I
ideas iniciales
just
del
express the
problema
initial
del
ideas of
desarrollo
the issues we
sostenible.
face in our
Ya lo
region.
había dicho, el tema del
I
cultivo
had
de
said
la
this before. Of course,
caña,
the
pero
sugarcane
recuerden
crops
también que no
is
solamente la contaminación,
kind of
sino que también disminuye
monopoly,
la
if you wish,
historia,
and
ya
it
que
has an impact
consume
on
agua
the
que
environment.
utiliza, el
It
agua se
uses a lot of water,
se
and
puede
they
depurar
use
y el acceso al agua
water
pues
too much. It's
se complica,
mechanized, used
pero
mechanized
también los cultivos
processing,
de
and
pino
it creates difficulties. But
que además
also
son
other
extensos
crops,
y que también está
pine
en
trees
manos
and
de los
eucalyptus. They
microempresarios
are
para
also carried by a multinational company, Smartfit, Cartón de Colombia. They want to produce
eso
paper
es
out of it.
parte de lo
So
que vivimos
it's
acá en
part of
esta
what we
zona.
live in
Entonces,
our region as
realmente
well.
creemos
These
que
big plantations,
quizá la mayor problemática que
industrial
padecemos
plantations, is one of the
los y las habitantes
problems. But the biggest
tiene
ones
que ver
that we
con
live
que a
here
veces
has
están
to do with
implícitas,
the
que se
extraction
ensañan
interests
en
that are
utilizar
here
estos
just
territorios. Y de alguna manera, yo en algún momento
somehow they want
manifesté
us remain
que esta
here.
zona no
They
era para
just want to
nosotros.
keep here in our
Y
territory.
decía, en algún
Somehow
momento se
we
los
felt
diré
that peace accord
porque
was not for us, and somehow we felt it.
pude ver
Actually,
cómo
we felt it
esos
like that
objetivos se
because we
expanden.
can see
Entonces,
how
por
these
eso,
crops
por
and these
ejemplo,
mega
ahorita que
projects.
tenemos la
For example,
amenaza
just now we have a
de
thread
que es
that
desviar
there is the interest of
el
institution
de
on
construir
the
una
Timba
represa
River
sobre
to
el río
build a
Timba
reservoir
también.
in the Timba River, to build another
Tienen una amenaza
reservoir.
parecida que puede
It's a
generar
new thread that might
complicaciones parecidas
create
o más
complications,
fuertes
similar complications,
en las
or even worse,
comunidades
because
aún
today
más
communities,
usuarios como
we
Kogui
are more
de las que
impoverished. We
generó
are
la
poorer
construcción del
than we were
Wiwas.
before, even before they built
Entonces,
the other
estos
dam or
megaproyectos
reservoir. So these mega
vienen con
projects usually
presupuesto detrás,
come with some armies behind them.
vienen con
They come with
un interés armado
an
que genera
armed
temor,
interest
genera
that
zozobra, genera
uh, threatens, it
desplazamiento,
causes displacement,
promoviendo pues
it causes fear, and
colonización
it promotes the right
que los
conditions
interesados
so that the
en
interested
esencia
parties
querían.
may just
Así que como pueden
carry
ver, el
out
panorama no es
their mega
fácil
projects. As you can see, it's
y
a
mucho
difficult
menos para
landscape,
nosotros los
much
luchadores de
less to
derechos
us, the
ambientales,
leaders
humanos y del
and
ambiente.
defenders of human rights and
Creemos que
environmental
seguimos trabajando
defenders. We believe that we should
en
continue to
esta
work, and we continue to
circunstancia.
work in very difficult
A veces
contexts.
sentimos muchísimo temor,
Sometimes we
muchísima
feel fear
desesperanza.
and
Sin
hopelessness.
embargo, hay que insistir,
However, we need to insist. We need to keep insisting.
hacer todo lo posible por
We have to do
generar las
everything we
mejores
can
condiciones de
to
vida
create other
para
life
nuestras
conditions
futuras.
for our future
Entonces,
generations.
ese es el motor que nos
So
alienta,
that's the
esa es que nos
engine,
impulsa
that's our
a
driver
seguir, a pesar
that
de que
pushes us
con toda la regresión
to
también
go on, even
de
though
la
we have
legislación
difficulties. And
ambientalista,
all the problems with
una
ethical
de las
regulation in our
dificultades
country
que hemos
is a
visto
drawback
desde
that
hace
we have seen,
meses
especially
en este gobierno
in this government,
por el ejercicio de nuestros derechos,
because uh, we haven't been able to defend our rights.
muchos como
And
que uno siente
sometimes you feel
que no
like,
hay mucho que
yeah,
hacer,
there isn't much to do.
pero bueno, hay que
But
insistir
okay, we need to insist,
porque
we need to
necesitamos
persevere,
buscar
just
la
like
manera de pasar
as
la
we said, that
página
we
de
need
guerra
to find a way to turn this violent page that
hay
our country
que
has lived.
buscar la manera de
We
pasar
need to
la
find a way
página
to turn that page of
discriminación,
stigmatization,
no
discrimination,
solo histórica,
not just
sino
the historical one that we have
institucional,
lived, but also
que
institutionally.
padecemos los grupos étnicos
We suffered, the ethnical
por
groups suffered
eso
that in
el
Colombia, and
avance
that's
en
why
la
the
implementación de
progress
las
in the
legislaciones
implementation
que
of the
hemos
legislation
conquistado
that we have conquered
es, es muy
is
limitada,
is
sino
very
todo lo
limited.
contrario,
On the
esa
contrary,
legislación y esas
that
infracciones
legislation and
cada vez
those conquers
se recortan, ¿no?
seem to be less and less,
Pues
seem
bueno,
to be littler and littler.
le
So,
cedo la
okay,
palabra al compañero
I pass on the floor to my colleague,
Gracias. Muchas
Amado.
gracias, Clemencia.
maybe Amado. Thank you. Thank you,
Marta,
Clemencia.
Amado, adelante, por favor.
Amado, go ahead.
Bueno, nuevamente, eh, la
So,
Sierra
once
Nevada
again, Sierra
Santa
Nevada
Marta
de Santa
es la
Marta, we'll
Sierra
call it the
de
Sierra,
Colombia.
which is in the north coast of Colombia.
Es la montaña más alta del mundo, arriba del
It's
mar.
probably the highest one in the world
Una altura de 5.000
because we have 5,775 meters.
de playa al pico
We
nevado,
have
son
from the
42
beach to the peak,
kilómetros en vía
there are
tierra. Ahí
42
tenemos
kilometers
digamos, a nivel de mar a esa altura y
from the sea level to the height. And
específica
that
para
has a special
tener
feature,
todos los climas.
and it has all kinds of climates and
Esta gran montaña,
different uh,
los pueblos
weathers.
indígenas
In this big mountain, the indigenous peoples,
las consideramos como nuestra casa, como la casa
we feel it's our home,
que
our
llamamos.
ceremonial home.
También tiene la interpretación del
We
corazón.
also interpret it as the heart of the world.
Es una fábrica de agua porque
It's a factory of water.
36 ríos
It has 36 rivers
que abastecen los tres
that supply water to three departments, Cesar, Guajira, and Magdalena.
También 6 ríos que
Also, six rivers
salen a la Ciénaga
that
Grande
go to the Ciénaga Grande
en el Magdalena,
in Magdalena,
que alimenta.
which feeds this
Hay unos ríos que caen directamente al mar,
um, area. Some rivers go
Cauca,
directly to the sea,
Magdalena y
and
también
others
Magdalena.
Magdalena.
Estas características
So these
hacen
features,
que
so
haya
special features
una
that I have
violencia
mentioned,
contra el territorio
have also created
que podríamos
violence against the
observar
territory.
de décadas. La primera, cuando
It was the first one
la violencia,
when violence
que llega mucha gente
that
desplazada,
hits and strikes people, and many people come from their areas that they come to the Sierra.
luego
That's how it started. Then
la llegada de los
the arrival
marihuanos,
of the gold diggers,
asociado al cultivo ilícito de la marihuana que
of course,
comenzó
associated to
a
illegal
la
crop of
década
marijuana. I'm talking about the 70s,
y después la llegada de los
and
grupos.
then the arrival of the armed groups.
Para nosotros,
To us,
como tenemos esa
since we
interpretación
have
de
this
la casa
interpretation
sagrada
of this is a sacred house or the heart of the world,
tenemos como la formación,
we have the training,
la
the
educación
education
de considerar
to believe and to
ese templo
consider that this is a
y una
temple,
responsabilidad frente al mundo.
and we have this responsibility in front of
Que
the
debemos
world,
de cuidarla,
that we must
no
cherish it,
solamente para nosotros, sino como
not just for
individuos,
ourselves, but this commitment to be able to
brindar bienestar
provide well
a
being to the
no solo
world,
aquellas personas,
not
sino
just
a todo lo que vive
people,
y
but
existe.
everything that exists.
Pero ha habido unas amenazas
But there have been threats, especially in the latest times,
es los proyectos que se
and
vienen
it's the
realizando,
projects that are taking place,
la represa del río,
especially
los
to build
estudios
reservoirs with the rivers. The studies that take place
la explotación
to exploit
hidrocarburos,
hydrocarbons
material de, de construcción.
and construction
En
materials.
este momento
And right
tenemos
now,
más de
we have more than 300 requests or applications for mining exploitation.
Nosotros logramos en
We
1973 el Estado
achieved in 1983 that the state would recognize this as an ancestral territory, a resolution that we call the Black Line.
y también el acuerdo que hace
And
Colombia con
what Colombia does, something Colombia did, where the indigenous peoples needs to be asked
para
the,
desarrollar cualquier proyecto
before any project is developed, anything that could impact
ambientalmente, espiritualmente,
us environmentally, spiritually, and in general, it might affect indigenous peoples.
hemos tenido la experiencia
We have had the
de
experience
hacer consulta previa,
to do this prior
pero
consultation,
nos dimos cuenta que
but we
no
realized that
garantiza
it does not guarantee
los derechos de los pueblos indígenas.
the rights of the indigenous peoples.
Las reuniones
The meeting
terminan siendo como
end up being
legitimación
just
de
like they just legitimate the projects or they confirm projects. So we haven't seen that
no hay garantía
there aren't any real warranties or guarantees for us to defend our territory.
para nosotros todo tiene un origen
Everything has an origin to us,
y ese origen
and that origin
todas
is
las
that
enfermedades que se
all
presentan
diseases that are
que
seen,
digamos que son
that
nuevas,
arrive, that
fueron dadas
they
desde
call them new, but nothing is really new. Everything has an origin,
desde
and they were just made captive from the origin,
en
from the
espacios
beginning,
sagrados
in some
representados
sacred spaces, represented
pequeña o alta espacios sagrados
in some sacred spaces.
lo cual la sociedad no
So
entiende
society,
de
the
defender
society that is not part of the indigenous community, they have been destroying
como
this
lo que ellos llaman el
with what they call development,
una mejor calidad de vida,
a better life quality.
pero lo que hace es que
But
destruye
what
el
it does
espacio
is that it
y es cuando
destroys these
nosotros
spaces, and that's when they release these diseases.
sufrimos,
And then we
la
suffer.
humanidad
Humanity
sufre
suffers.
la naturaleza
Nature
porque
suffers
comienza
because
a
it begins
disminuir la
to
nieve, desaparecen
diminish,
las nieves,
and the snow
comienza a
and the
caer
ice
el sol,
melts and the climate changes,
comienza a perder caudal,
and then there's less
se empiezan
flow
a
in the
desaparecer
rivers have
y ya
less
no
flow, and
tenemos.
many creeks actually dry out and disappear, and then diseases come.
En la cara norte
In the north side
tenemos
we have
los monocultivos de banano y
some
palma,
banana plantations and palm
lo cual tiene una
plantations,
exigencia del
and
agua
this demands water
que
use,
prima por encima
and it's more important
de las
than
personas.
people.
Ha habido proyectos de
There
hacer
have been projects
reservorios
to
bien
build some reservoirs, to build
pero
some
ha sido,
dams,
digamos, una lucha
and it's been a struggle
por dar a entender
to
que los indígenas,
make us
el proyecto
understand that
indígena
the indigenous
es
project,
incluyente, el
the
proyecto
influence that the
indígena
indigenous project
defiende
defends
la humanidad,
humanity.
defiende
It defends
al hermanito menor, como
our
nosotros
younger
decimos,
brothers, as we call it,
que no es
our younger
solamente para
brother.
nosotros.
And it's not only for us or to us.
Y eso ha sido muy
And
difícil.
this has been very hard.
Con los grupos armados se
With the armed
confunden
groups,
con los
they
con las Fuerzas
become
Armadas
confused with the
organizadas.
institutionalized armed forces. They come together, they
Nosotros
blend,
creemos
they become one. We, as indigenous
a lo último pensamos
peoples,
que todos son
we
iguales,
think that they're all the same
porque además los
because
indígenas son hermanitos
they're
menores,
all younger brothers,
vestidos igual,
dressed up pretty
con
much the
armas
same,
que matan.
with
Entonces no hay
weapons that
diferencia.
kill, arms that kill. So there's no
Y a
difference
veces
between them.
sabemos que
And sometimes we know
las alianzas,
that they're alliances,
y eso lo conoce todo el
and
mundo,
everyone knows that.
no solamente que lo diga uno.
It's not that I'm saying it.
Entonces, a raíz de todo
So,
eso,
because of all of this,
conversando
and then talking
con, con Mamo
with Mamos, with
en el
the
año 2002,
community leaders in 2002,
el Mamo me dice,
Mamo says
por
to me,
principio,
the leader,
no,
the
porque
chief
aquí
says
no
to me,
podemos
in principle, we can't
defenderlo
defend this territory
con la violencia, sino que
with
tenemos que
violence, but we
comenzar
have to
a
begin
partir
to
del
share
pensamiento,
the
las
thought, the
interpretaciones de
philosophy, the interpretations of our
y la
territory,
violencia no la compartimos.
and we don't share violence.
Es como cuando yo
That's when
decido
I
dedicarme a la
decided
fotografía,
that I must
publicar un libro
write a
y
book
poder
and
hacer
be
películas
able to also make
para
movie,
poder
make a movie, to be able to teach
a
and
esta
spread
sociedad
and
no indígena.
teach the non-indigenous society.
En el camino
Along the
hubieron
way,
dificultades,
there were
amigos,
difficulties, but also
amigos
friends
que apoyaron como el
who
proyecto
supported this project,
y hemos logrado hacer
and
cosas
we've been able to do things,
importantes
important things,
como la de visibilizar los pueblos indígenas de la
to
sierra.
make indigenous peoples in the Sierra more
Anteriormente
visible.
siempre
Before,
veía
we always saw
en Europa de la Sierra
in
Nevada,
Europe, in the Sierra Nevada and the Kogui, they saw it.
esperábamos también que la Sierra
Well,
Nevada
we
fuera
make
solamente
sure
para
that
los
the Sierra Nevada is only Kogis,
pueblos
but there are
indígenas
4 indigenous
con
peoples
la misma responsabilidad,
with the same
que es
responsibility.
el Wiwas, el Kankuamos y
There's
el Arhuaco.
the different
Cómo
peoples
se
that
ha
have in this
compartido
area,
todo eso.
how we have shared that.
Uno, por lo que escucha,
Based on what one hears,
es más peligroso
it's more dangerous
hablar
to
de los
talk
derechos de la
and to
naturaleza
defend the rights of nature
que
than
otro crimen
any
o
other crime or any
acto
other, I don't know,
nos
misbehavior.
desviamos del
We
objetivo militar o
became a military objective. We became, I don't know whose target,
escucha una son
because
los asesinatos de los
we've heard about assassination of
derechos
leaders
humanos,
of human rights
de los derechos de la
and the
naturaleza.
defenders of
Entonces,
nature and environmental defenders.
nosotros seguimos
So
insistiendo.
we continue to
Yo siempre
insist.
me acuerdo de un
I
video
always remember a video
indígena de
by
Brasil
an indigenous member in
que decía,
Brazil that says that
tanta tierra para
so
poquitos
much
indios.
land for very
Y
few
el
Indians,
indígena dice,
and the indigenous says,
no,
no,
más bien poquitos indios
it's very
defendiendo la
few
vida.
Indians defending life.
Entonces, con esto
So
que nosotros hacemos,
with
que hablo
all
de
this that we
respetar,
do
es como
to defend the
llegar
Sierra,
a esa sociedad grande
we need to
de que ha llegado el momento de
tell
compartir
this big society
la
and
responsabilidad
tell them that it's time
por la
to
vida,
share this
por
responsibility to
cuidar
take care, to cherish life, water, air,
los árboles, las
trees,
aves,
the birds,
hablar por los que no tienen voz.
to speak for those who do not have a voice. So
Es ahí donde nosotros nos esforzamos
that's where we struggle.
a través de la imagen, a través
We try
de
to be
videos,
present in
para
videos and
tocar el
to
corazón
show
de la
images
gente.
to be able to touch the heart of that society.
Pero también pueden
But
pasar
also,
cosas positivas porque si
there might be some
decimos
positive things because
30 años atrás,
if you think back 30 years ago,
prácticamente los indígenas estaban
practically the indigenous
hablando
peoples, we were only talking
de los
about
derechos de la naturaleza.
the rights of nature.
Ah, no, es que estos indígenas son
No, those
flojos,
indigenous peoples, they're just lazy.
no quieren trabajar,
They don't want to
ahí es
work.
donde tendríamos la despensa.
That's where we can
Pero
have
ya
more production.
existen
But now
muchísimas
there are
organizaciones
many more organizations, NGOs,
políticas
and
independientes
many independent parties
que la misma naturaleza
that nature itself
le ha dado a entender
has made them
que si no
understood,
paramos,
has made them
eh,
knowledgeable. They have realized that unless we stop, it will not be
nuestra
possible to
vida se
continue to live,
pierde.
that life will
Entonces,
vanish. So,
lo que podemos sacar de
well, we
positivo
can,
es que ya los
that's a
indígenas
positive thing that we, the indigenous peoples, are not alone anymore.
ya somos bastante.
There are several,
Con ese
there are quite a
sentimiento
few.
y esa
So, with that
responsabilidad
feeling and
de
that
conservar la
responsibility to
sociedad,
preserve,
lo
to
hacemos.
care for
Entonces,
nature, so
luchamos
we fight
de que la Sierra Nevada siga siendo
so that the Sierra
nuestra
continues
fuente
to
de vida,
be the heart
que
of the
siga
world,
distribuyendo
that it
sus
will continue
recursos,
to distribute its
que son
veins,
los ríos,
which are the rivers,
que le llevan alimento al mar
that bring food to the sea,
y el mar en
and
agradecimiento
the sea in return
sube en vapor y nuevamente cae la lluvia a los picos nevados,
rises as vapor and lands
que
as
nieva y
rain
vuelve a
on
refrescar
the
el mar
peaks, and it
y
becomes
hacen
snow,
un
and
trabajo
then it's a
increíble
cycle. It
con
melts
las
and goes back to the sea.
tradicionales que
It's
hacemos.
part of our work.
Y
This is
cuando
where we work at
hablamos
traditional work.
de la vida, del
And when we
agua,
talk about
solamente
life, water
significa
is not only water.
hay una relación
There is a relation that is
que está en el
comprehensive,
uso, está
that is using.
en las
It's
árboles,
healthy. It's everywhere.
que va cambiando de acuerdo
It
a esos
changes according
criterios
to the
hasta
thermal,
llegar a los
the
pájaros,
levels, the height, or the
están
altitude.
las aves
And then we have the
que
birds
cantan de noche
that they
y que
sing at
cantan de
night
día,
and they
que
also
cantan
sing
al agua,
during the day,
a la
but they
vida.
sing to water,
Todo
life.
ello debe de
And all
conservarse.
of them,
Esa es la
this needs to
idea
be
que hay,
preserved because
que
that's
creo
what,
que
because is that everything works in harmony.
me podría extender más, pero
I
bueno,
could keep speaking, but okay,
dejo ahí.
I'll leave it just like that.
Amado, muchas gracias.
Thank you very
Realmente
much, Mamo. Thank you, very inspiring.
reitero el agradecimiento porque quedamos muy inspirados
Once
para
again, thank you. It's a big inspiration and we can keep talking. I'd like to pass on the floor to Wenzel
Magdalena Medio,
from Peace and Development Program from Magdalena Medio, and then there'll be time for dialogue amongst you, and we'll open the floor for others.
invitar al público a que utilice
And probably invite the audience. I invite the audience to use the question button, QA button
que está en la parte de abajo
that is there
y al igual
on the bottom of the screen,
como el chat y allí nos pueden hacer las
and
preguntas
there you can ask questions. All right,
nuestros panelistas las puedan responder.
so then the panelists may answer.
Muchas gracias. Eh, yo quiero
Thank you very much. I'd like to
de alguna manera
offer to say it
esta
somehow
conversación
this conversation
desde el amor y el dolor profundo de
from
los
the love and deep pain and also the hope
de la lucha de los pescadores
of the
del río
struggle of fishermen,
y
the
comunidades
fishers,
pescadoras del río
and
Magdalena.
these communities of the Magdalena River and the ecosystems.
Eh, y tomo a Lucho Arango como un
And I
pescador
mentioned Lucho Arango as a fisherman.
que para nosotros ha significado como un
This
luchador
has meant to us a comprehensive fighter,
fuente
not
del valle
only
medio en cuanto
in
el ecosistema
Mid
estratégico
Valley, where there's an strategic ecosystem
junto con el río,
that it comes together with the river,
sino también,
but
digamos,
also
una mirada
from this view,
de la importancia también de la
also the importance of peace construction, peace
Lucho
building.
Arango fue asesinado
Lucho Arango was assassinated
el 12 de enero del
on January
2009,
12, 2009,
años después de la
2 years
demovilización
after the
militar,
mobilization of the paramilitaries,
que fue liderado justamente por esos reductos
because they opposed to these actions of the paramilitary that were present back then. So this is just an important example. This is an axis. When the program started,
como de entrada en esta perspectiva ambiental,
we took this environmental perspective
pescadores
and we started work with the
y
fishermen
pescadoras,
and the fishing communities of
trabajo con
fishermen.
los campesinos,
The work also with peasants, farmers.
el trabajo también con las
We
comunidades
started work with the communities association of agriculture, farmers, agricultural miners, and farmers and miners, agricultural farmers and miners to recover the ancestral practices and to protect the territory.
y también,
And
digamos,
also,
el
let's say,
proceso
all the
que ha
process
ido generando,
that has
digamos,
been
en ganar
gaining
conciencia
momentum to
en
have
el
greater
derecho
clarity
humano,
on understanding human rights,
también como el
to
derecho
place
humano
it as
al
human rights,
territorio y del territorio mismo como una
the
entidad
rights of territory and the territory itself as an institution, as a body
su
subject of
potencia
rights.
y su gran subjetividad. Desde el trabajo
So
con los pescadores
the
de
work with the fishermen,
hoy,
I think
hoy en
today
día, digamos, se mantienen las asociaciones de
we
pescadores
keep the Association of Fishermen along the Magdalena River.
ese fue
In
también un
2012,
trabajo
when we did
sobre
some work
propuestas
on a
de
proposal,
investigación que
a
permitieran
research project
identificar las
to
asociaciones
identify the impact on the river,
propuesta
and at the same time, the
de
proposal, proactive proposal to restore
de la llanura aluvial del río
the
Magdalena,
valleys of the along the Magdalena River
un punto importante para
as an important point of
la recuperación del río en
to
este
start recovering the river
trabajo de los pescadores.
in all this work of fishermen. Today,
Hoy se mantienen, digamos,
we keep
esta dinámica
these dynamics
de trabajo en la región,
of work in the region.
un proceso muy importante que se
It's a very important process that connects to the Federation of Fishermen that is along Cesar, San Patosa Swam, and it connects to Magdalena Medio, the Federation of Fishermen of Puerto Berrio and La Dorada in the mid and high parts of the Magdalena River, then the Federation of Fishermen and whose headquarters are in Magangue. They also articulate all these actions in the territory. We have made progress in placing to the uh, in making public some strong proposals. And right now, there's a proposal that is ongoing and it's in the Senate of the Republic, the declaration of fishing, artisan fishing as a heritage of Magdalena River, as also a way to be able to provide a response to this surge of construction and protection of the environment, seen from a comprehensive and territorial viewpoint. Here, it's a constant struggle with the um, industry of palm, also the industry of cattle raising,
digamos, los hidrocarburos,
and HCs, hydrocarbons, the hydrocarbon exploitation in the territory, and today is very present. It's a big concern, deep concern about fracking.
el Magdalena Medio es una de las
Magdalena Medio is one of the zones, maybe
definida como epicentro
defined as the main center for fracking. It is believed that now in November they'll be granting one of the pilot projects or license for them. Also, power plants in the territory here in the region of Puerto Anare, the Samaná River, and Rio and Naro River, and Sogamoso River here close to Barranca Bermeja. So in these places, all these dynamics impact not only fishermen, but also everything that has to do with their communities, those who live and contribute to life, the sustainability of the river, and that's the water that is being threatened. That's an important element. Lately, well, in the past few years, probably 10 last years, it's on the table, the issue of the navigability of the river. There have been made many efforts to call attention to create some kind of dialogue about it, a constructive dialogue about it, but we still can't take this coherently and with the greatness that this demands, especially the questions, the requests from the communities to take into account how this project will impact the communities and the region as a whole. The other dynamics, as I said before, the Magdalena Medio is one of the 50 regions in Colombia that has more biodiversity, is one of them, uh, one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. We are amidst the Chiriquíes, Quinche, Perijá, different mountain ranges in the north of Aguachica. This is the north of the south of Cesar. These is just water refineries. Here, historically, they say the communities, agriculture and mining activities, as they identify themselves, they fight so that there is recognition to this small mining artisan, uh, ancestral mining, and a big campaign and to do this sustainable mining with the little resources they have in this in the middle of threats and situations. They're in disadvantage, especially given the mining code and mining law at the national level. But there have been scenarios of dialogue and interlocution to keep the voice and to feel as valid interlocutors in these dynamics from the regions, the territories, and together with the central government. So right now, there is a process of discussion, let's say construction, if you wish, to look in greater depth to understand. I think there is consensus about the need to create a protected area and a conservation area in the San Lucas mountain range, but the construction process is how it should be done. So there is a position that is a comprehensive, a national management system, but they are involving other zones that allow this work to allow the communities, both mining communities as well as peasant communities that are present in the area, may have a way of life, the livelihoods. But this zone is, as Clemencia put it, we have mining there. There are excavators that it's just crime. It's crime machinery. Not only lives, victims, but also nature and the rivers. It creates a situation that is very complicated. However, there are big efforts in the territory to find alternatives, but uh, there's a situation that is very delicate for leaders. And not only assassinations, but also they are prosecuted, the leaders, because here that's how we understand it. We are leaders of the territory, and here we have a comprehensive view to see life as a set of complexities that provide life. The other elements that are related to the situation of this region is the mid valley of Magdalena was inhabited basically by farmers, but today farmers
migrados
have
hacia las
been
laderas y
displaced
todavía
to the
hay un
foothills,
cierre de
and
frontera agrícola
they have an agriculture uh, closure,
ahí hay por
and it's ongoing.
desalojos de grandes
They have been
dimensiones,
detached from their lands.
desalojos en los
They
esfuerzos
have been
que las
displaced
ONG hacen por tener
in spite of the efforts
soluciones
the
alternativas,
communities
digamos, a la tierra,
present to make
en esta región.
their
En
rights
este territorio tenemos en este momento
valid.
alrededor de unos
In this
45
territory, we have about 45 to
procesos
50 processes
de comunidades campesinas en
of
el territorio
farmer communities in these territories
están
who
buscando
are looking for a way to,
por un lado, su restitución
on the
y
one
por
hand,
otro,
to
la
have land
recuperación
restitution and the recognition as a farmer community, because they've been there historically for years. They have been working and fighting and struggling, and they require
territorio para
their
seguir
territory to be able to
la
continue
vida
to produce
necesaria
life, the necessary life, and the life that they love
en esta región.
in this region.
Eh, en este momento hay
Right
en
now,
Magdalena Medio
Magdalena Medio,
también un gran desafío que tenemos
there's also a big challenge,
la ubicación de
and it's
de
the
Magdalena Medio.
location where we are.
Su ubicación geográfica
The geographical location of Magdalena
para
Medio is a
la entrada
central point
del
to
centro,
arrive to the country. It's the center, west, any other region, north of the country, everywhere.
lo forma
It's a
una
privileged
posición,
location.
diríamos, geoestratégica, no
It's
solamente
so
por
it's
importancia
geostrategical, not only for national importance, but
estamos
also
allí
even international importance. That's where
en los
it's here,
resultados ya
where
más adelante podemos
in the
desarrollar.
challenges we can
Aquí
discuss further.
el
But
desafío
here, the
es
challenge and the challenges are not just to
de
work
cara al Estado nacional,
and
sino
to
también
defend our territory in front of the national state, but also over state of supra-state
también en otros
interests,
ámbitos, digamos,
that it has other areas, other
y
spheres
es allí
of
donde
regulation. That's why we see the
consideramos esta
importance, and
perspectiva,
we believe that the
la
perspective of human rights,
perspectiva de, digamos,
this
la
perspective
Defensa
of
Nacional
international
puede
treaties,
situar ámbitos de
may
defensa y protección territorial,
place
digamos,
a, I don't know, some aid or help to help us defend the territory and protect life.
podría, digamos, como ir dejando por ahí esos elementos,
Those
digamos,
are the elements I wanted to
la
list.
otra gran esperanza
But another
de la
big
región
hope in our
y solo
region, I'd like to mention this,
ha sido los acuerdos,
has been the
finales de paz.
final peace accords.
Históricamente, esta ha sido una región de vocación de paz.
And basically, this has been a region of peace, with peace vocation. Many initiatives have started here based on our own efforts, and they evolve progressively, regionally and nationally. And we believe the agreement, the peace accords, to be the big summary of all these efforts, and it would allow for better ways of life in our territory.
La manera como se
The
estructuran
way
estos acuerdos
that the peace
dejó
accords
mucha
were
esperanza,
assumed,
muchas
it
expectativas.
rose a lot of
Digamos,
expectations.
hoy sigue estando
So let's say it
latente
continues to be there, it's latent, and we continue to fight and defend
con
this
esta
hope
fuerza
and
necesaria para
to
que
make all our possible efforts
reforma en este territorio y el
so
proceso de
that
reintegración
the
se
reintegration
entienda como la
processes
integral de verdad,
and
justicia y reparación,
the
digamos,
justice,
siga
truth, and
avanzando
reparation system continues to be a
para
reality
garantizar
here in our
esta
territory
perspectiva,
to guarantee the
la
perspective of
región
peace building in our
pueda
region.
tomar
And
forma
we can at the same time
mostrar
show
confianza
trust,
en otros
express
procesos necesarios
trust and other processes that need to take place
y otros
with
movimientos
ELN and other armed groups that are present in this
digamos, para
region
poder avanzar hacia una
to
paz
be able to progress to comprehensive peace,
completa.
towards complete peace.
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, muy bien. Yo quisiera entonces ahora
Okay, now I'd like to open the floor
invitar a
and
Amado
invite Amado
y a Clemencia y a Wendy. Quisimos tal vez
Clemencia and Wenzel.
hacerlo de esta manera para ver
We decided to organize the discussion this way
construir entre las experiencias que son supremamente ricas.
the we wanted to hear to the experiences first. Their participation was very inspiring. I think it'd be nice to it was nice to hear them, and it'd be nice to probably hear them again. But then now we can insist that the audience, now you can use the QA button If you want to participate, it's in the Zoom platform. At the bottom of the screen, it says Q&A, and then you can place questions there
entre nuestros ponentes.
at the end of for this dialogue. I can share them with you.
Entonces, incentivarles a que
Okay, so I encourage you if you want to ask questions for the panelists, or if you want to participate or to talk about it, to add something, it's all welcome.
bueno,
Bueno,
ahí sí puedo, yo puedo, sí, Wenzel, si querías decir algo.
Sí, yo
Oh, and
quería
Sel, you wanted to say something? Yes, I just want to add,
Amado y a Clemencia que me
tell
encanta
Amado
mucho
Clemencia that I am pleased to have here with you, to learn from you, to hear from you,
porque ustedes son realmente como
because
nuestros
you actually are our brothers, our bigger, our big brothers, our older brothers in all this process.
como les decía,
As I
en la
said,
región hay una conversación
here in the
muy
region, there's a deep
con,
ongoing
ya
conversation
con mucha expectativa, con
with many
controversia,
expectations, and there is
también
controversy,
frente
but there is also
a la
hope
necesidad
about the need
declarar una
to
zona
declare
protegida
a protected area and a conservation area in our region, in this specific case in San Lucas mountain
y
range
también en las últimas
or Sierra.
manifestaciones que han
In the
habido
last movements
eh, se ha
in the
planteado la
territory,
necesidad de
we
ampliar
have stated the need to make progress and based on the experience of the Atrato River
exigir
to
que
demand
nuestros ríos
that our rivers, our
sean
creeks,
consideradas sujetos
or
de derechos
streams be considered
ambientales.
as subjects of rights also. And
Y la amenaza que les decía
the
es
threat that I said, the big threat,
a que esta región
in the
tome
sense that
forma
this region is a hub
de un
for the application of the
de esta tecnología
this technology that is so-called,
muy, bueno, digamos, muy
very openly, colloquially called as fracking,
razonamiento y
which
la
is fracturing and
cuáles
hydraulic
serían
fracking.
las recomendaciones
What would your recommendations be? What criteria
para poder
would you give us to be able to
proteger
make progress in protecting life,
la
not
vida
only life, human
toda
life,
la
but
naturaleza
also nature, life as a whole,
todo lo que
the
rodea
rivers, and all the living beings, those who inhabit this territory?
Bueno, decir que en nuestro caso, lamentablemente,
Well, to say that in our case, we also have this threat of fracking.
el año pasado
I
hicieron
think last year there were some
pequeños ensayos donde
first
efectivamente se
trials where
probaron
actually they noticed they could find oil.
lo que hemos visto
So
es
what we have seen
indígenas
is there have been some
para
movements
ello dos
in
grupos
that
de
regard.
trabajo,
So two
muchos
things. First,
comunitarios acá
community
congregados
councils.
en consejos comunitarios de la
In the
Secretaría
Association of Community Councils, they have taken a very dynamic role,
tratando
very
de
active role to defend
del territorio,
the territory,
específicamente para esto del fracking,
especially
pero
related
también
related to fracking.
esta zona está cobijada por
But
la
this
Resolución
zone is
05
covered by
del
law
artículo
005 by the
y lo que
Constitutional Court.
estamos es abogando
It's
y
a decree,
exigir
I
la
think, and
implementación del
what
cambio.
demand is the implementation of that
Habría
decree.
que mirar
We
qué
need to see
legislación
what
se ha dado en
legislation
este territorio
has been passed about
pueda
that territory, which may
puede
be
ser una
useful,
herramienta útil
which may
para
be a
la
useful
defensa,
tool to defend
para que no hagan esta práctica en el territorio.
the land and not
Sé que
to
no es
allow
fácil,
these practices in the
pero
territory of
estamos
fracking,
básicamente
this fracking practice in
contra
the
un gigante.
territory. We know it's not easy. We're practically fighting a giant, but these are the
Legal de
few tools we
conservación de
have.
nuestros
Legally
derechos
speaking,
hídricos
related to our
y
ethnical
la
rights and
unidad como
basically
comunidad.
the unity as a community.
Fuerte de
We need to
conciencia en la
do
gente
strong work and
para que
create aware,
caminemos del mismo
raise
lado.
awareness among people so that we are on the same side. Because many times it happens that they take advantage of the
Para
division
generar
among the
falsas
people
expectativas que
to create
realmente
false
no son
expectations, and in the end, they
entonces hay que
impact
hacer un
everyone.
trabajo de
So we need to
educación,
do a lot of work on
capacitación e
education,
información
awareness raising,
para que la
sensibilization
población pues
about the
realmente
risks,
sepamos y
the
detectemos
the advantages and disadvantages mostly of these kind of mega projects,
y en particular pues el tema
and
de la
especially
exploración de estas
the issue of
tecnologías
exploration in
y que las
with
personas
that
también una vez
technology.
conociendo
And the
estos
community,
factores,
once they know,
también más
they are
tienen un poder
informed, they can
incisivo en la
play a
organización de
more
estos
decisive
protocolos
role in defending their
individuales.
territory. I think we are more if we are together.
Gracias, Clemencia. Amado,
Thank you, Clemencia Amaro. You want to add something?
Amado, estás en silencio. Si quieres
Amado,
conversar, tienes que activar el micrófono.
it's muted.
Bueno, es una pregunta bastante difícil.
It's a very difficult question to answer.
Empezamos como con esa amenaza.
We all face these threats.
Para nosotros como indígenas,
To us as indigenous peoples,
logramos, entre más fuerte la cultura
we
indígena,
believe the stronger the indigenous culture,
podemos estar como más unidos.
the more united we can be, which is really important.
Y hay experiencia
And there is some experience
de ríos
about rivers
que se declaran con
that were
derechos.
declared as subjects of rights.
Avances sobre eso.
And that is some progress. There is some progress there.
Eh, para nosotros, todo lo que sucede es
To
consecuencia
us, everything that happens
de
as a consequence of, it's a consequence, it's an indication that we are doing something wrong. It seems like we are guilty
cumplir la ley de
somehow,
como realmente debemos de cumplir.
and we are not doing what we ought to be doing.
Pero es muy importante que
At least not everything, but it's important that people be united.
en este momento o
Right now, the tools, then the social media, that's really important.
participación de la gente de la
The
ciudad,
participation of people in cities, that's also important.
que en esa parte pues nosotros como indígenas somos
So
débiles.
there we are as indigenous peoples, we're weak to have an active network to mobilize people,
En el sentido de poder proteger la vida.
just to be able to protect life.
Pero también vivimos como la
But
época donde
also, we live in a time when harmony has become sick, dialogue has become sick, tolerance, understanding, they have become sick because we cannot understand one another.
y eso construye como divisiones
And
tan
so this builds big divisions. They're so big
más difíciles.
that it's even more difficult to protect life and protect nature.
Entonces, haya habido unos avances.
So there has been some progress. There have been some achievements, some breakthroughs,
Debemos de
national and international. We need to take them into account and continue to progress. Once again, 30 years ago, we were lonelier.
hemos avanzado.
So we have made some progress and we need to continue to make progress.
Muchas gracias. Bueno,
Thank you very
tenemos,
much.
lamentablemente nos quedan 12 minutos
We have 12 minutes left,
y hay una serie de preguntas.
and there are some questions from the
Si les
audience.
parece, yo lo que voy a
So
hacer
if you
es
agree, what
mencionar
I'm going to do is I'm going to mention all the questions,
libremente
and then
que
freely
conectes con
any
nosotros
one of the panelists may
la pueden
address any of the questions and answer in the time we have left.
Muy bien. La primera
Okay,
pregunta que
the
veo
first
aquí
question I see here are what the most efficient strategies to face or stop mega projects, in your opinion?
hay otra pregunta
Here's another
sobre
question
cuál
about
cree que sería la mejor manera
what's the
de
best way to ensure
las visiones de los
that the
pueblos
views of
son
indigenous
tomadas en
peoples
cuenta
be taken into account
la mayor, en la mayor extensión posible.
to the best
Eh,
possible way,
hay otra pregunta
to the
que
largest
dice cuál es la
extent.
relación
Another is
ideal
what is the ideal
entre
relation
los
between
ambientalistas
environmentalists,
y el gobierno de
activists,
Colombia.
and the Colombian government?
¿Cuál es esa relación ideal?
How is that
Otra
ideal relation, ideal relation. Is there any other global movement that you have learned from or shared solidarity with, or you have worked with? Another question: what do you see as the role
para apoyar
for outside support, and what do you think is the best way that people present at this event could contribute or support to your cause? Okay, there are many more. I don't think we're going to have enough time to answer all of them, unfortunately. But I like to leave it there and give you time so you can answer, so that the panelists may answer. Go ahead.
Eh, sí, digamos desde la región del
In a
Magdalena
region, in Magdalena
muchas
Medio,
dinámicas
there are several
relacionadas
dynamics that are taking place
a la defensa del
regarding the defense of the environment and nature.
hay sindicatos como el caso
There are unions, for example, the Ecopetrol Union and
en su
the
misma, digamos, agenda
workers union,
también incluye
and
trabajo
their agenda includes some work regarding environmental protection,
considera el tema del
and it
fracking.
takes into account fracking.
También hay organizaciones
There are also other organizations, environmental
enfocadas en el
organizations,
cumplimiento
and these should all
internacional
create a movement in the
y,
region
digamos, articulado
and
a nacionales e internacionales como el
articulate to national and international movements such as the uh, practices or partnership for the control of fracking.
crear, digamos, escenarios de
So to
discusión
create the discussion scenarios and teaching scenarios,
todavía,
but
digamos,
still,
no se encuentra,
we still do not find,
considero yo, y
I believe,
creo que está el desafío,
I think that's where the
un
challenge is,
consenso de
to
comunidades
build
científicas en la
consensus,
región
in the region
para
amongst
poder
peers, so that
identificar
we can actually, by peers I mean
estamos
that
distintos
we
y tenemos
are,
diferencias,
we're different, there are
pero
differences,
vamos a
important
buscar
differences,
siempre
but we can
aquellos
still
propósitos y
take
objetivos para
that
poder
higher
mejorar
purpose
la capacidad de interlocutar con el
and have greater capacities to interact
Estado colombiano
and dialogue, talk to the Colombian state,
como
the
se ha hecho
Colombian government,
usualmente en escenarios internacionales.
and as it's happening in international scenarios, these reports, but
No alcanza uno a ver
you
que haya
cannot
incluso
see that there is also respect
a las
from
mismas
the government for
que tiene
their
que declarar
institutions, the institutionality that it
defender
builds to provide its own warranties, for example, to preserve life
a
comprehensively,
nivel nacional y eso lo
the
vemos en otros
territory,
casos.
and we see this in the cases of our region.
En otros casos hemos tenido también la
In other
experiencia
cases, we have seen the experience that we have
global
had to take to the international context, especially
hay, donde importa mucho el tipo de
where it's very important the business type that is being done
está la actividad productiva
with a given productive activity to be able there to create there
digamos
at that level a greater level of
válida
valid dialogue
y poder tener una incidencia mayor.
and to impact more. That was a case of a farmer community called Las Pavas.
Llevamos esta discusión
We took that discussion at an international level.
a la entidad internacional, la voz
It's an international body.
que era
They were the body.
no tan final, pero sí que transformaba la materia de palma
Those were the ones that transformed the oil, the palm oil. We left it to that scenario. We took a report there, and then there was a reaction, an opportunity for dialogue. So that was the process. It was part of the process that communities tried to do to guarantee the rights and to
y lo
protect the
otro que
rights.
nosotros hemos aprendido mucho en este
We have learned a lot in this region
poder mantener siempre
is to be able to keep the interlocution between the region and the nation, this dialogue, without losing the regional perspective, of course. But what happens here in this region is determined at the national level. It's decided at the national level. That's why it's important to keep this dialogue between the region and the nation.
Amado, Clemencia.
Amado or Clemencia, the others.
Si estás hablando, Clemencia, estás en silencio.
Sí, sí, estaba hablando.
I'm sorry, my mic was off. I was just saying that one of the strategies for or to stop these mega projects, I think it would be very useful that both the government, the state, which finally grants the licenses, but also the investors, private investors, foreign investors that come to extract our natural resources, they should respect the right to life, the right to culture, the right to identity, that they took into account that these territories, well, they usually serve as the habitat for communities, ethnical communities. That's what we can see throughout the territory where the richness is in the territories. That's where the communities are. And so they should take into account that there are people there and people with rights, people's people with rights, rights such as the right to life. And they should start by checking how they exploit. They should review their practices, taking into account those considerations. I mean, how we use, okay, resources more rationally so that we can at the same time respect life at all levels, not just people's lives, but the ecosystem that's there. I believe we would have to think, we need to stop and think about more creative actions which avoid the way that the extraction, exploitation of resources has taken place so far. Now, about the ideal relation with the government, I believe that as long as the government is thinking only of satisfying external interests and economic interests, the relations will be very complex. Here, it also takes a change in attitude and it takes a change of thought to think not only of development but also the economic model. When we think about doing this seriously, I believe then we can find common ground which allow a more fluid and constructive relation between those of us who defend rights and those who defend interests. That's what I like to say from my side. And whether we share work with other networks, actually, yes, especially yes, the Black communities, PCN at the national level, we have participated. Yes, we have developed campaigns. I remember one we held for several years. It, it was filming attack and building territories, something like that. And at the moment when the territories in the Pacific, especially, was very strong intention to expand this oil palm, there we played a key role. The organizations, those of us who defend the environment and the ethnic and territorial rights, together with partner organizations in the US and Europe, many of us were able to travel and run awareness campaigns to achieve political support on the work that we do. And precisely because of all this political support, we were able to achieve some results and include in public policy some elements that contribute to the defense and the protection of the environment and our rights. However, we still have a lot to do. I believe there is awareness and a great opportunity to continue to do a lot of work in an articulated manner, both nationally and internationally. It's a pending task that we need to strengthen.
Gracias, Clemencia. Ya el tiempo se nos agotó, entonces quisiera darle
Thank
la
you, Clemencia. We're out of time.
Amado
So
para
I'd like to pass on the floor to Amado.
las
So
respuestas y ya
to give
procedemos.
us a short response and then we close.
Bueno, hay una particularidad de cuando defendemos la vida, que
When we
defendemos.
defend life and we defend nature,
Amado, estás en silencio.
¿Me escuchas?
okay, now, yes, we can hear you.
¿Me escuchas?
Okay,
Eh, Cuando nosotros
when we
defendemos la vida,
defend life and nature,
los
life, which is nature,
pueblos
the
indígenas,
different
los
indigenous
grupos
peoples,
étnicos
the
tenemos
ethnical
algo en
groups,
común.
we have something in common.
Entonces, yo diría casi lo
So I
mismo.
would say that I agree with the others, what the other colleagues have said,
Hay esa
because there
responsabilidad
is this responsibility, let's call it.
que no es de camiseta, sino
It's
de
not just a T-shirt, but um,
que miramos
it's
la
a training of a
naturaleza como
person
ser
to
viviente con
see
derechos.
nature as a living being with rights.
Aprovecho solamente
So I
para
take advantage of the opportunity to congratulate our colleagues for the work they do
al público que tuvo
and the audience that joined us today.
y qué debemos hacer, pues que ellos
And
nos
what
sigan.
we should do, well, they continue to hear us, to listen to us, and they join us to defend
Muchísimas
what
gracias.
nature is. Thank you very much, and a big hug to everyone.
Amado, a usted muchas gracias, a Wencelia, a Clemencia,
Thank you, Amado, Wenzel, and Clemencia, for your time. Thank you for being inspiration. As a matter of fact, Amado, our commitment is to support the work you do, make it visible, support it in many ways, multiply it, and disclose it widely. Because, like I said at first, human life has an absolute value, but the life of a social leader and environmental leader is even more valuable. So it's our duty to defend and support our leaders so that their work agendas may flourish and they they, they may become legitimate in their territories. So once again, thank you very much for your time. Unfortunately, there were many questions and we ran out of time. I want to thank the audience for joining this meeting. And again, I want to thank Duke University, ELI from the US, and GGGI, and the uh, Peace Environmental Construction Association. Thank you for putting this event together, and I thank everyone and have a great day. Bye.
Gracias, muchas gracias a todos y a todas también por
Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Amado, un abrazo, buen día.
ya se fue.
Bueno,
Ok.
un abrazo para todos.
Thank you, everyone. A big hug. Thank you and goodbye.